with a crowbar.
Oh, hey, everybody. We're not talking about crowbars. We're not talking about Goodfellas, although it kind of feels like a nice little crew. My friend Andy Dolich. Andy is a longtime sports executive with the Oakland Athletics, the Golden State Warriors, the San Francisco 49ers. You even consulted with the Raiders for a bit, right?
Nope, never consulted with the Raiders. Consulted with the Coliseum authorities when the Raiders were coming back. Other sports, Washington Capitals hockey, the great Memphis Grizzlies, and now the superstar John Morant, and pro soccer with the Washington Diplomats. So that's a bit of 55 years or so in the world of sports.
Andy, I'm going to get straight to the point. What do you think of the way the Oakland Athletics have handled the Howard Terminal situation to this date?
Well, first and foremost, I got to say to you, thanks for being the eyes and ears on all that's part of Oakland. There's not enough focus on the city. And I was very, very lucky to be hired by the Haas family in December of 1980, not 1880, but 1980. And had, a spectacular run of success with the team. And I never quite understood Oakland's position of not being as proud of itself as it should be. It has a high level of low self-esteem for no good reason. And I know that you've been direct and vigilant about bringing the stories of Oakland, good, bad, and ugly, to as many people that will listen. So I personally appreciate that because it's not easily done, especially when you're in a marketplace with a global neon city like San Francisco. And then people go, "Where's Oakland?" And it's like, it's right here, baby. It's right here. Answer to your question, it's a maddening process. Now, I have part of my DNA in the Oakland A's and always will, along with many, many other people who worked in the organization and millions of fans who followed this team for decades. It is either time to get a deal done or move on. And we'll get to that in a moment. We have the circumstance of the parallel path, which to me is a smack in the face to Oakland fans. If you're rooted in Oakland on one hand, how can you have a parallel path that you're leaving to go to a place unspecified in the southern Nevada area? And we've lost. Was that a Russian hacker, Zennie?
No, she's
we've lost a football team to Las Vegas, even though it's only across the bay. And I was there last night. I didn't pay money to go to a game in Oakland. I went to pay money to a game in San Francisco. And I don't want to see 3 strikes and you're out if the A's were to move to some other city. There is so much complexity at Howard Terminal. I understand John Fisher's position and what President Dave Kaval has said on his behalf, that we believe, the A's believe, that the new urban ballpark city at Howard Terminal will be a transformational project for Oakland and the area. Well, I've been a pretty outspoken person that believes the same circumstance could happen at 66th Avenue. It's not going to, because the owner of the team says that is never happening. It's not an urban location. We'll talk about that later. I don't quite get that. And so if it is going to be 100%, correct me here, 100% privately financed, which John Fisher has said through Dave for years, isn't it time to absolutely, specifically, legally, and financially define that? What does that mean? Because the A's, you tell me, have 2 numbers, one for the ballpark alone which is about $1 billion, and the other for the dream of the new urban ballpark city with retail, with living, with incredible park space, with the EIR being as clean as possible, with safety across the Union Pacific rail lines, with safety across BART, with new entrances and new exits. When is that going to happen? Because if that's not starting today, we won't be at a new ballpark for a minimum of 5 years, no matter what anybody says. And as we also know, the A's said pre-COVID that they were going to break ground in 21 at Howard Terminal and play their first ball game at Howard Terminal in 23. Yep. Now, there's no way the A's could have seen, or the rest of the world, that COVID-19 would change our lives every day in every way, in the new different that we all live in. But the level of frustration that there aren't specific answers, and I'm almost close to finishing the answer to your very simple question, Zennie.
Your time.
In this time frame, over the last few years, what have we seen? We've seen a $5 billion football stadium built in Inglewood, California. We have seen a new stadium built in Las Vegas. We have seen, sorry, somebody's probably trying to get it. We have seen a wonderful new facility built for the Sacramento Kings, the Golden One Center. We've seen a spectacular new facility for the Warriors in San Francisco. We've seen Levi Stadium come out of the ground. What is this, year 6 or 7? And, you know, if we want to go back 20 years ago or 21 years ago, one of the greatest ballparks in the majors, which is now Oracle Ballpark. I have a difficult time calling it that, but that's what it is.
AT&T, baby.
AT&T, baby. I'm with you.
Or Pac Bell before that. You know?
So how could all of this have happened and the A's are still playing, in their view, of an unacceptable ballpark at the Oakland Coliseum? If the owner, who has a net worth of $3.2 billion, can't make something happen in the 17 years that he's owned the franchise, well, I'm a bit baffled why that hasn't happened.
I think I can help you in terms of answering some of the basic financing questions and help filling some blanks in, because it has been murky, perhaps deliberately so, one would say, but I'll leave others to judge. It's supposed to be $12 billion. Actually, it's $7.676 billion, but it's spread out among a various number of developments that occur over a 6-7 year period. The ballpark is supposed to clock in at $1.5, maybe $2 billion. The problem they got into, Andy, was that when they decided that it was $12 billion, they did not say, hey, if this is a redevelopment area, they didn't tell what the actual revenue throw-off would be, which is $9 billion. That's one problem. The other problem is that as we speak, the city is supposed to get them their TIF number. So I know that those areas you don't understand, but I'm saying all those because as you and I speak, the Athletics are waiting for the city number, which Dave then says will inform how much money they can put in the project. In other words, the city is supposed to pay back the infrastructure spending to the A's, but if the city is calculating using a bad calculation, as I call it, because it's right, and they don't get that back, the A's has some thinking to do. Right now, in terms of the private part, the A's claim is the only part that's private is the shell, and that gets to, I think, a statement you made about even then paying for that. I don't know what their sponsorship's going to look like. I know the Warriors had, $2 billion of sponsorship, something like that.
Well, here's one point that, having been involved in building a facility in Memphis, FedEx Forum,
right,
and if you look at all the deals, Golden One, SoFi, Levi's, where I was involved in the early stages, those naming rights deals are done in many instances months or years before the facility opens, because that maximizes the utilization of the sponsoring organization. you haven't heard word one about a corporate, maybe you have, I haven't, of a corporate naming partner for the stadium at Howard Terminal. And so I scratch my head. Can you buy season tickets today to games at Howard Terminal in the new ballpark? I'm not sure you can, especially if you were going to break ground a few years ago. And even with these complexities, a marketing organization of a team is a year out front in selling VIP seating, selling corporate sponsorship, selling exclusive presenting sponsorship, selling the naming rights. And we don't have that. Now, I will say there's three major entities that are needed in any successful business: teamwork, leadership, and trust. Zennie, you've had as good an overview of all of this as anybody. Can you say that the city, the county, the state, the A's, Major League Baseball are together on the same page with teamwork, leadership, and trust?
No.
Not even close to it. And these are gigantic programs that can transform. Here's an example. 23 years ago, you and I would not go to China Basin. We just wouldn't go there. Or Mission Bay, whatever it was called. Is it not a miracle that gets more miraculous by the day? And that came through teamwork, leadership, and trust. We won't go back to all the pieces that fell together, and Mark Benioff and UCSF and the Warriors going there, and Peter McGowan and Larry Baer and Willie Brown and all those people working in the same direction in an incredibly complicated marketplace like San Francisco, where there was pushback, but they did it. And it's not happening in Oakland, which is maddening.
I got to ask you about that, because I remember that party that the Warriors initially had. Remember that for Pier 32?
Pier 30 and 32. David Stern was there. Joe Lacob and Peter Guber had their sunglasses on. Yep.
Yeah, I interviewed all of them. And, Lacob, I basically said, well, what do you think about being sued? And I wasn't being jocular. I mean, that was the talk among some people. But, he, to make a long story short, basically said that Oakland had challenges. And it seems like we're seeing the same challenges today. And how much of this is the fault of the way the city does business?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Piers 30 and 32, because that was, you had the late David Stern and Peter and Joe, and it was happening. It was happening right there. Now, as you know, the color of the fluid that flows through the veins of sports is green. And when the Warriors found out that that location, because of environmental concerns, because of community organizations, because it was going to take another few years to build it and a few $100 million more, they went, timeout, just as Steve Kerr would go, timeout, let's look at another place. And just think about how quickly, how agile and nimble they were to find that other place and build what is a miraculous facility at Chase Center. Yep. How much of it is the city and the county of Oakland? It's as much as the A's or Major League Baseball or John Fisher's ownership, because they haven't been able to break through the logjam when cities, counties, elected officials, and owners in and around Oakland have been able to do it at costs that are, pretty significant in a marketplace that is not easy to do business with. When we were in Memphis building a new facility, and our facility came in at like an outstanding $325 million for our building, it was pretty simple. The mayor said this and the senator said that, and it was like, okay. And our owner said, fine, I'm in with that. Boom, done. In this scenario, putting the complexity aside, which you can't do, nobody's on the same page. When is the last time that you've seen an open press conference that was presented by Mayor Libby Schaaf, the county, when the county was still in this, John Fisher, and Rob Manfred? When is the last time you've seen that?
Way back when it wasn't. It didn't. You know what? None, because
You've never seen it because it never happened.
You've been at the table. Dave has, but not Major League Baseball. So you're absolutely right.
I have, Dave is the president of the club.
Yep.
But Dave does not have a net worth of $3.2 billion, and he does not own the Oakland A's. John Fisher does.
Never. It's like they are off. I get the sense. Do you get the sense then that, maybe take this another way. Why, in your view, did Las Vegas come up, or was Las Vegas always there and we just didn't really pay attention?
You look at the history of the last few years in Las Vegas. If we looked at our crystal balls, Zennie, 7 or 8 years ago and said, hey, Zennie, I'll bet you that the first major professional sport that will be in Vegas will be the National Hockey League, you would have laughed me out of wherever we were, right?
Oh, yeah.
And boom.
A fully bodied guffaw. Absolutely.
They did it. It was spectacular. They also caught the DNA of the city when the horrific shooting took place. They became part of it. They helped heal the city as much as you can in a significantly horrific scenario. And then the whole aspect of gaming in sports, legalized betting in sports, started to show itself with more and more states approving it. Of course, Vegas is the location, and leagues look at the money in the future. And that got the Raiders there. But what got the Raiders there, and you can correct me, the state said, oh, how would you like to have $800 million or something close to it, right?
Well, actually, it was more like Sheldon Adelson and his.
Well, there were two. It was Adelson's money and the state's money, and boom.
But I should add when I say that, because it is a really cool story of how Nevada works, and I learned this over the time. And the reason why I did that is because Adelson had hired 14 lobbyists that went on.
Only 14?
Only 14 that went. He spent an ungodly sum on them. And they were bird dogging the legislature, which is then mostly Republican, but they were actually about to turn. Now they flipped to Democrat. And they were on their way to a 60% positive vote on the night of the 14th of October of 2017, if memory serves. 2017. And because I was up bird dogging it on Twitter and every at the time. And then the Nevada Department of Transportation dropped the 900-pound gorilla of studies that said that infrastructure improvements for Allegiant Stadium, what we now call it, would be $900 million. And at that point, it was thought, okay, this sucker is dead. And I say all that to say this. Adelson's lobbyists went to work, and they got 2 votes. They were 2 votes shy of failing. That's how close the vote was to passing. So that's where that. So you would say, what is it they put in the law? It was something called the Southern Nevada Tourism Infrastructure Act, within which is the $750 million that you referred to, but also gave, among other things, the Raiders the right to basically all but own their facility. In other words,
right.
And so that's where that's.
And we also had the back and forth when Mr. Adelson was alive that he wanted a control position with the franchise, and Mark went, nope, I don't think that's happening. And Sheldon said, see ya.
Yep.
But let's go back to the A's in Las Vegas. As a marketer, as a business person, you always want to have a horse race, whether it's, 2 beer companies, 2 car companies, if you're out. So in this case, where you're not absolutely certain that you have Howard Terminal as a done deal, and you've absolutely ruled out, at least from what I hear, any other Bay Area location. I mean, it's not just we're focused on Howard Terminal. It's we're going to build at Howard Terminal and no other place in the Bay Area is even going to be discussed. Now, Vegas shows up, A, because it is the flavor of the month, meaning what's happening there, teams looking at it, NBA discussions, the success of the NBA Summer League. A lot of postseason college basketball tournaments are in Las Vegas, legalized gaming, and the fact that there's a lot of money in Vegas and there's a lot of individuals with a lot of money. But to this day, Zenny, and I think we were talking before we went on the air, can Dave Cavil and John Fisher say, we have a deal in place with this community in Vegas. We have the land. We're moving down the path of negotiating. We're going to spend $2 billion or $1.8 billion on a convertible dome stadium. And we're happy to pay whatever the relocation fee is going to be that Major League Baseball is going to require for us to move to Las Vegas. Where are we with that right now?
How does that work? How is that fee going to work, Andy?
Well, again, until there's a legal document, when sports teams relocate, I'll give you a simple example. We relocated the Memphis Grizzlies from Vancouver. I think we were the last team to go across an international border, now that I think about it. So the other, 29 owners of the NBA said, well, that's fine, but you're going to have to pay for that. We paid, if I remember correctly, Zenny, $35 million over time. It wasn't just one step. Now, if you look at other relocations in other sports, those numbers, like anything else, are going up to the hundreds of millions. Again, the figure that I heard, but that doesn't mean anything other than I heard it, is $500 million. And the other point, baseball has said, not a secret, we want to expand by 2 cities. We want to add 2 more cities to Major League Baseball to get to 32. But we can't do that until we clear up Oakland's ballpark situation and Tampa's ballpark situation, neither of which are, ready to have a steam shovel in the ground, neither of which. So baseball has said, or they've let it be said, that the fee that they're looking for in these 2 expansion cities is $2 billion. I don't know about you, Zenny. I think $2 billion is more than 500 million. I think. And I think 2 times $2 billion is $4 billion. Now, if Zenny Abraham, who knows the country pretty well, was going to get a clean sheet of paper like this and is asked to put 2 expansion cities on his list, wouldn't Las Vegas be one of those 2 cities?
Yeah.
In the United States of America?
Definitely.
So I don't know this, and it's only speculation at this part, but if in fact the A's do move to Las Vegas and they do pay a relocation fee of whatever it be, then Las Vegas is out as an expansion city. And that changes the dynamic. Now, that's sort of a complication that doesn't deal with what is on the ground here, which is lots and lots of money being paid over time to develop Howard Terminal.
Quick question. Does that mean that there could possibly be a shift to, say, Portland or somewhere else in a way as a chase for that money, for that fee?
Later today, you could come up with another city. The Portland ballpark project has been out there for 2 or 3 years. There's an ex-Nike executive, not Phil Knight, but, there's a group. But I don't believe they have a stadium deal done yet. I mean, they don't have a stadium deal done yet in Portland. There are some other challenges in Portland, weather-wise. You've got financing from a state, a city, and a county, which you have expertise in. You can talk about markets, right? You could say, well, let's talk about San Antonio, or let's talk about Charlotte, or let's talk about, someplace else. Those someplace else's have lots of complexity, just in terms of elected officials and the legal aspects of building. But Portland is not baseball ready. What other city in the United States could a team move to with a state-of-the-art new stadium that they could move into? And, I would just say this in terms of the expansion. If I were a major league owner, if I was a decision maker, the number one city for expansion that I'd be looking at is Mexico City, the largest city in the world, with incredible revenue from broadcast, incredible corporate revenue. And I'd make Fernando Valenzuela the president of my team, and I would, have 6 private jets. So, but that's a whole other story. We're talking about the Oakland A's, who have been in this marketplace, who have won 4 World Series, who have a tremendous history that's at jeopardy. Last year, even with COVID and protocols, the A's drew 702,000 people, the lowest attendance since 1979. That's impossible, but it's real. And what would they draw this year when we're still in the midst of a baseball lockout?
Thank you.
We're still in the midst of the A's constant mantra, we can't afford quality players, so who's going? Bob Melvin, in my view, one of the most underrated managers in baseball, has said it's been great. See you later. And what completely blows my mind, if you tried to create Marcus Semien, you couldn't do it, except for the fact that he was playing for the Oakland A's. St. Mary's High School, Cal Bear, totally involved in the community, a great player. Ron Washington working at him, an improvement. Bye. See ya. Because we can't afford it. Total BS.
If you were hired tomorrow,
I won't be.
If you were, anything could happen. If you were hired, if John Fisher were considering hiring you as his consultant, what's the first thing you'd like to do?
I'd want John to have an open press conference and tell the marketplace why he owns a professional sports team. That's number one. I'd want to know, in that press conference, I'd like him to explain his strategy, not tactics, but his strategy of what his long-term plan is for this team that he's owned for 17 years. Again, which sounds like, no, he didn't own it for 17. Yeah. What do you plan? And I'd want him to show the marketplace some cashier's checks or direct deposit on some of these areas that if you're getting this approval for EIR, if the city is going to approve it, if you can actually start building, then why not start building? Because if you're going to wait for all of the complexities of the new urban ballpark city, if you're going to wait for Schnitzer Steel, if you're going to wait for the Pacific Maritime Association to get their plans all heard, if you're going to talk to labor unions, well, when are the A's going to play in a new ballpark at Howard Terminal? I want the A's to stay in Oakland. If it's Howard Terminal, that's fine. But when is Howard Terminal happening?
I tried to get that out of Dave Cavell, and I think he's waiting on the city. So it's still this sort of waiting position. But my question for you is, at what point, from your perspective, should the A's cut bait if they truly have someplace else to go in Las Vegas, as opposed to some people who contend that it's all a smokescreen in Vegas just to get something out of Oakland? What say you?
Well, I think right now, Oakland, other than the fact on April, whatever, the season opens, hopefully, and we don't lose any regular season games to the lockout, we know we're going to be at the Oakland Coliseum. We know we're going to be at the Oakland Coliseum the next year and probably even the next year after that. But if, in fact, you want to leave the marketplace, you don't think that you can ever come to conclusion at Howard Terminal for everything that we've talked about and others have talked about for years now, then do your deal in another city, but don't have a parallel path of smoke screens in two cities. That's what I believe is happening. If we hear in this marketplace that there's a deal done at Summerlin or Henderson or another location, and that John has partnered with a multi-billionaire X, Y, or Z in Vegas, then you go, okay, that's probably going to happen. And let's forget about Howard. But I haven't heard that. And I won't bring up the Coliseum, but you could have already played in a new quality ballpark in which you could have built housing, of which you could have attracted entities from the Silicon Valley to build there. But, that has just been said, no, that does not play. Don't bring it up to us. It's never going to happen under a John Fisher ownership.
I know this falls into an area which you may not consider your expertise, but in a sense, maybe. I'm of the view that if we had a council manager form of government rather than strong mayor, we would have had a better professional class of people to handle this situation versus what we have now. Am I right or wrong? And how, if you were talking to the mayor, and maybe you have before, how would you advise her to straighten out this situation?
I go back to what we talked about earlier, Zennie. I'd ask any of those individuals that have followed this as either Oakland A's fans, sports fans, just casual observers, where is the leadership? Where is the teamwork? And where is the trust between all of those entities? And, even if you go back to some of the strong city managers, a Robert Bob and others like that, you see it. And we're not even talking about the Coliseum site and the level of confusion there in what, Ray Bobbitt has done with his group and the other 50% at the Coliseum, right? Which is ultimately part of this equation.
The ENA now, Dave Cavall said they've been meeting on a monthly basis.
Yeah, well, they've been meeting on a monthly basis for years on a lot of stuff in terms, and I'm definitely being a smart ass here. They've been meeting for years on the site in Fremont. Oops. They've been meeting for years on the site at Peralta offices when the president went, excuse me, you said we have a deal? Au contraire, right? Au contraire, because he's French. Like, we don't have a deal. Oh, we're going to build at Victory Court. Yeah, okay. No, we don't have a deal. Coliseum City. We remember that. Now, the A's didn't say yes to that. Whole other story. But there are 5 or 6 locations that moved down the path that never got any place. So the strong form of government that you're talking about is missing. The fact that a city and the county, I had that scenario in Memphis. We had Shelby County and the city of Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
And what was spectacular is that the mayor of Shelby County and the mayor of Memphis, they worked out their differences behind closed doors, and they went ahead and that got the Grizzlies for Memphis. And they sat with Fred Smith, the chairman of a fairly successful company called Federal Express, and said, well, yeah, we'll help build an arena. And that happened in a 2-year time period, a 3-year time period. So you look at all of these other circumstances around the country, you have elected officials, and there's another thing that's missing here, Zennie. who are the business leaders of yesterday, of today? You know, I had the greatest respect for Cornell Meyer, who passed a few months ago, you know, and people like George Vukasin, who made things happen. You know, the Dryers guys, the Clorox people.
Gary Rogers. Yep.
Exactly. They put their business caps and their community caps on together and made Oakland one of the most successful sports cities in the country. And now we're looking at a significant circumstance where there may be zero. That's a migraine headache.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not fanciful. We're living through this right now. And who are those civic leaders? You're close to this. You tell me who they are.
They're not.
Now, I appreciate, excuse me, but I appreciate what Ray Bobbitt is doing and the people that he put together and Dave Stewart. But I'm talking about people that control the resources of multi-billion-dollar companies that those individuals did. And, you know, Cornell Meyer will never get all the credit he deserves for what he and his team of great people at Kaiser and others did to keep this city vibrant.
I think to answer your question, I figured out a really short one. By way of example, Ron Conway, who I've known for years, started SF City. You might know about that. There's no SF City is a kind of a political action group for tech people in Oakland, tech or companies. There's no Oakland equivalent. Now, I'm not talking about how you might feel about it. I'm saying to the general audience, the simple fact of the matter is that there are organizational examples of, and let's face it, tech is at the pinnacle of business in Oakland. There's no example of that in the Oakland parlance. It should be the Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce. It should be some organization like that which could weigh in. The chamber used to weigh in on these matters, as you remember, of sports. They don't do that anymore. And I'd love to have Barbara Leslie on to counter me on that. I'm not looking to seek an argument. That's just my perception. But I think I've been around long enough to say it.
And I'm very proud. It's light years in the past, but you think about the 1987 All-Star game, which we hosted. And there were so many people that came from around the country that we showed to really go after getting the game. And we showed them the Paramount Theater and they go, when did you build this thing? Did you just build this? And then we took them to Lake Merritt and they go, wait a second, this is the largest saltwater thing in the middle of a city, any place in the United States. And then we took them up to Piedmont and Montclair for events. And they go, oh, is that why these millionaires live up here? So they could look at San Francisco? And then we took them to Jack London Square with Gallagher's and parties. And people went, is this Oakland? And I go like, yeah, this is Oakland. And I go back to that Oakland, and I found this a bit in Memphis when I got there. It had the highest level of low self-esteem in the country for no good reason.
Right.
And you look at the positives that are occurring, you know, Upper Broadway and so many areas. But Oakland overcomplicates itself. And if I look at Howard Terminal, you couldn't have picked a more complicated location. Now, people would say, well, you have no vision, you don't understand. And I was like, I understand hundreds of ships out in the bay and out in the ocean that can't get in because there's too much traffic coming through the Port of Oakland because it's a living, thriving, tax-paying, job-employing entity. Why would you want to screw up with that when you have other places? I don't want to go back because it's Howard Terminal or bust. I don't know that they've actually used that term. But
no, Dave Cabal has said Howard Terminal or bust.
So you want to tell me Major League Baseball, you have a problem with young people embracing the game. You clearly have a problem with diversity in African-American players. And like, we weren't lucky or anything. Hi, I'm Ricky Henderson. I'm from Oakland. Hi, I'm Dave Stewart. I'm from Oakland. Hi, I'm Joe Morgan. I'm from Oakland. Hi, I'm Dennis Eckersley. Hi, I'm Carney Lansford. Hi, I'm Shooty Babbitt. Hi, I'm Marcus Simeon. Oh, okay. So you're going to leave that market to go to Southern Nevada, which doesn't necessarily, you help me here, Zennie, doesn't necessarily come up as the most diverse location in North America.
No, although in fairness, it is changing rapidly because of the pandemic.
But it's not Oakland.
Like, no, it's not.
It's not what we have here. And if you want to, if you're Major League Baseball, and you would say, well, you have two teams here. Well, you can ask Pat Gallagher or Larry Baer or anybody else. For a number of years, not a ton, the A's and the Giants, when they're both playing well in the mid 80s and late 80s, we outdrew Chicago.
Yep.
We outdrew New York. So don't give me that argument that the Bay Area is not big enough. That's baloney. And you can tell I'm not emotional about this, Zennie, at all.
I promised 40 minutes, but I could go longer. What say you?
Well, let's say we've gone through 9 innings. Let's go to 10. But at 10, we're going to have a home run derby. And whoever wins the home run derby will agree that we'll do a double header. We'll do another time.
You got it.
Give me 1 or 2 more hits for the 10th inning.
Here's one. It has to do with relocation. How does an organization pay back a relocation fee? And I say that because for the Raiders, it was $350 million, but there was questions raised as to whether or not it paid it. You mentioned $2 billion in the case of Major League Baseball. And that's my first question. My second question is, and it piggybacks on naming rights, how is it that Farmers can put $700 million for LA, right?
Well, greatest naming rights deal done in the history of sports, period.
Thank you. And we don't have anything like that in Oakland. And yet, what is it about LA that captures that magic that we can't get in the Bay Area?
Well, answer to your first question is simple.
Sure.
Money can always be negotiated. You've seen enough deals. So whether it was a measly $35 million for the Grizzlies to leave Vancouver, go to Memphis, it was paid over a period of time, $3 million a year, and it was paid by the owner. Now, when you're talking about hundreds of millions, I believe it's paid by the owner. Now, what kind of terms they work out? We all have deals, mortgages, etc., and we have terms. You buy a car, you have terms. So I can't say what the terms are, but that is the responsibility of ownership, unless ownership, as an example, John Fisher, let's say the number is 300 million relocation. And he has a partner that comes in and says, oh, as part of that, I'll underwrite the 300 million, or the community, or a giant corporate sponsor. Hughes Corporation, right, which has ownership of the A's AAA facility in Summerlin. The Hughes Corporation, Howard Hughes, multi-billion-dollar corporation. In Oakland on naming rights, one of the lost points about our success in the early 80s as Billy Ball was built and we got attendance back is we didn't look at the market as just Oakland, and the market isn't. The marketplace is north to Sacramento, south to Salinas, Monterey, east to the Vegas border. Remember, the Giants were the ones that were waving bye-bye.
Yep.
They were leaving because you froze your butt off in the summer at Candlestick Park. And my good friend Pat Gallagher, you got a quad to candlestick to freezing yourself during a baseball game. No, that's not what you want to do.
We got to get Pat on here. Let's do that next
time. He'll do it. And we were just going back and forth because we just played the sunny side of the bay. And it worked. People were coming from Embarcadero on BART, and we were drawing 32,000 people at weekday day games. And then people go back to work, or maybe they didn't go back to work in the city. Maybe they went on to Pleasanton or San Ramon. So we viewed that entire market. The A's don't seem to be doing that. They don't seem to be marketing that footprint. And the Giants have had unbelievable success. over the last few years and winning World Series. In this market, you have to market all the time. And, back to whether it's Howard Terminal, whether it's some other site. Hey, Elon Musk, when I drive past Fremont, I see you don't even have room to park your Teslas. I got a place where you could build some plants. I got a place where you could transport some of your cars. I got some container ships that go all over the world. Why isn't anybody, talking to those major tech firms? Every place in Northern California is the Silicon Valley. Every place. It's not just the Flying Saucer in Sunnyvale. Who knew about UCSF until they helped spur one of the greatest medical research locations in the world in and around UCSF? You can't tell me that Cal Berkeley has all the places it wants to expand to that couldn't expand. And it's on and on and on. When is the last time? Here's the 10th inning, and you would know this and I don't. Was there ever a time in the last 3 years before, or 4 years before the Raiders left, before the Warriors left and the A's, where the city and the county and the three owners sat in a room with, somebody and said, you know what? Let's talk about working this out. Because as of today, we have 3 teams in 3 different leagues playing in a great city. Did that meeting ever happen?
No, in fact, it was damaged. The possibility of that meeting happening was damaged in 1996. And I know Ignacio was going to get mad at me for saying this, but it was true. When and Elihu too is going to get mad at me. But the simple fact of the matter is they chased George out. And when I was trying to bring the Super Bowl to Oakland, George did not want to work with me, not because it was me, but because it was, the city had basically wrested control from him because he said that they weren't reporting. My point is that gets into political minutia that it would seem minutia, but it's very important. Prior to that, when it was a privately ran, we had a Coliseum board. It was publicly owned, the Coliseum, but it was privately ran, as you know. We had Mary Warren and we had George as the president. They had those kind
Jack Maltester. There were,
yeah, absolutely. They had those kind of meetings. And if you're listening to this and saying, well, that's business muckety mucks, well, you know what? Look, everybody's a muckety muck. Even the person that is the usher at the Coliseum is a muckety muck because we all know somebody. All right. So forget all that.
I would just say this as we close the session. And again, I thank you and I thank all the people that have listened, and I'm more than happy to listen to people's differing opinions. But if you are any city and you lose, if you're Detroit and you lose 3 major automobile manufacturers, what happens to you? If you're in New York City and you lose 3 gigantic financial businesses, what happens to you? If you're in Dallas, Texas, and you lose 3, natural resource companies, we're on the verge of losing 3 major corporate entities. And I'm not, there's taxes paid by the players. There's taxes paid by the owners. There's thousands of jobs, and we're this close to losing 3 major industries. If you're an elected official, you're told to go bye-bye if that happens. And why, there isn't more anger in the marketplace for what has occurred and is happening is a bit mystical. Now, everybody has challenges in today's world, but you don't lose 2 businesses of this import that makes your community look terrific over decades, and possibly a 3rd without a plan.
I'd like to add this to add on to what you're saying. I think it'll resonate with you. I'm 3,000 miles away. I work online, as you know. I study Google Trends. To make a long story short, Oakland has literally fallen off in terms of recognition, having any good news about it, because what happens at, say, the Coliseum, because it would be in Oakland, or the arena, or anything else. And now it's replaced by negative videos about homelessness and everything else. Andy, we're getting killed because we do not have these gigantic marketing engines in Oakland.
you got, momentum is very, very difficult to regain, and it's very difficult to start. I will end this way. People tell me when I use the example of Mission Bay, China Bay, so, well, that's San Francisco, we're not Oakland. I go, okay, I don't buy it, but fine. There's a place called Emeryville. Well, 20 years ago, you go to Emeryville today, you go, holy, and I won't curse. It's magical. I mean, in terms of what they're building there, in terms of young people that are moving there, in terms of where it is. You mean to tell me that Oakland couldn't do better than Emeryville? Nothing against Emeryville. I think it's a swell place, and I think the people are great. So come on. You got to get moving here. This is not a game. It is baseball. It was football. It was basketball, but it's hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. And Oakland is being left out because of lack of teamwork, leadership, and trust. Thank you, Zennie.
Andy, stick around in the background. Thank you so much. Paul Cobb, publisher of the Oakland Post, says Andy is hitting a home run with his analysis. Why won't the city listen to him?
I give credit to Paul Cobb, who, like you, has been a great voice for the city over a long period of time. And if he isn't frustrated and hasn't moved to Monaco or someplace, I give Paul a lot of credit. So pass that along to him.
You got it. We're going to have him on too. And Dave Compton, longtime listener and investor in what we do, says, wow, he's hitting on point. Talking about you, Andy. So we owe you.
Well, I would just leave you with this. I was lucky enough to work with the great Dwight Clark when I was at the Niners. And all I can say is go Niners.
Go Niners.
Go and go Warriors.
Go Warriors.
And don't go A's.
Don't go A's.
Meaning don't go anyplace.
Right. Stick around. Andy, we're going to have you back. We're going to bring Pat on. That'll be a lot.
Gallagher is way less expensive than me, Zennie.
I'll figure out a way to get both of you in the room. We'll work on it.
Well, where are you going to be? Where are you going to be if we have us on?
I'll sitting back what I do, listening.
All right. Well, thank you for the time. And I'd ask the Oakland fans and all those others that have a role in this, please think about the opportunity here. Whether it's Howard or another location, it's time to do business. We live in a world of the new different. Think different, do it, because you don't want to be 3 strikes and you're out, and we're perilously close.
Folks, he's the man. Not only that, come back, tomorrow at 5:30 Eastern, I'm going to have my good friend Jared Bell of USA Today coming on, talking about the conference championships. We're on a roll, folks. We have some great people in here. We're going to have Andy back with Pat Gallagher, or even we can't get him. I also want to get Andy back on a regular basis and work some stuff out.
Thanks, Zennie. Be safe, be healthy. We'll talk soon.
Stick around in the background, Andy. That ends this broadcast, folks. Thanks, everybody.